This is Back to Back.
Yo, what's up, back-to-backers? This is Willie Joy. Welcome to the show. This is Back to Back. This is my podcast. How you guys doing? How you feeling? You guys have the flu? I feel like everybody's got the flu right now. I don't, because I'm a good boy and I got my flu shot, but that didn't stop me from getting a pretty bad cold. You can probably hear I'm still a little stuffed up, but it's all good. I'm getting better. For all you guys who are under the weather, I hope you get better soon. And if you are feeling like you need a little pick-me-up, you've come to the right place. My guest on the show today is Bro Safari. Love this dude. He just finished up a nationwide tour at the end of 2017, and his new remix that he did with etc. for A Different Way by DJ Snake just came out. It's a crazy remix, and as always, I'm going to put links to where you can go check out all of his music, dates, all the good shit in the description of this show. But before we get into that conversation, let's read an email real quick. Haven't done that in a while. Today's email comes from Chris. He says, "Hey Willie, big fan of the podcast. I'm an amateur music producer and I'm starting to feel confident with my music. I want to start emailing blogs, YouTube channels, small labels, etc. In your opinion, what are some do's and don'ts in building a network?" Well, this is a question that, we could devote an entire podcast episode to this alone. But I think to keep it short, the number one thing I would suggest to anyone in this position is make sure that your music is top quality before you send it to anyone outside of your circle. People do tend to stick with their first impressions. That's not a great quality of humanity, but it is the truth. It is what we deal with as artists. So if you come out of the gates with some next level material, something crazy that people haven't heard before, something really, really high quality, that's going to be people's perception of you going forward. So everything you do after that will be looked at in that favorable light. If you take a look at your music and realize that with another month or another 3 months of work, you could make something much better than what you've got now, take that time. Be patient. The fact that you're unknown right now can actually be an asset if you take your time to craft your introduction to the world in the right way. So that being said, what you're really asking about is the best way to approach people when you do want to send them your music. Basically, I would say take the time to find the right emails for the demo submissions at labels, the promo submissions at blogs or YouTube channels, whoever you want to find. And when you do send it, you just got to understand the reality is these addresses get so many submissions on a daily basis. People cannot go through them all. If you don't hear back, don't take it as an insult or a slight. And really, it's up to you to kind of build your own following. The way a lot of these labels, a lot of these blogs start noticing people is when they're making noise online in other ways, getting a big following, getting talked about by other artists, that sort of thing. If you can figure out a way to meet the people that you're really interested in working with, if you can physically give them, a USB or something like that with your music on it, that gives you a lot better shot of having your music really heard. The personal connection really is everything. And when you meet people, whether you're sending an email or you're meeting them in person, don't be annoying, be really nice. Keep it very short, keep it brief. Just say your piece, introduce yourself, hand off whatever you want to hand off, and that's it. If you haven't heard anything back, just keep working, keep pushing. Your own ambition and your own drive are really what's going to carry you through all of this. So good luck, get out there, and most important of all, do not be a punisher. If you have a question for me, a comment, you want to send me some music, you want to let me know who else you want to hear on this show, anything, you can always email me at backtobackpod@gmail.com, or you can hit me up on all social media at backtobackpod or at Willie Joy. And also, don't forget to subscribe to this show on whatever platform you're using to listen. And, if you got an extra minute, leave us a rating and a review. That really does help the show grow. All right, so for this conversation with Bro Safari, I met up with him at his hotel in LA. It was really nice, man. We were really, really high up with this sort of panoramic view of the city. And I've been wanting to sit down with Nick and do this for a long time. I love talking to him because he's been in the game for a long time. He's had a bunch of different phases to his career, and all of his successes really feel like his own. He's done it his way. He has a very DIY attitude about everything that he does, not ever looking for handouts or even really to try to emulate what other people are doing. I think every time you hear a Bro Safari song, you know that you're going to get the pure expression of a real artist. And that's something I've always really appreciated about him. We talk a lot about those DIY roots. He got started as a drum and bass producer and went through a few different evolutions before coming to the Bro Safari that we know now. And I just think he has a lot of valuable insight for really anyone working in the music industry in 2018. I'm going to let you guys stop listening to my stuffed up voice. Let's get into it right now. This is me and Bro Safari back to back. Let's go.
Are we rolling?
Yeah, we're rolling, baby.
Okay.
We're out here in Los Angeles. This is probably the most picturesque view I think I've ever had when I'm recording one of these.
Before you came over, I was thinking the same thing. It's nice.
Really
it's a nice backdrop.
Yeah, I love it. And you used to live here, right? In LA?
I did. I was here, I think, probably about 5 years, mid-2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you miss it?
I miss certain aspects of living here, sure. I don't miss how expensive it is. And the main thing that got to me when I was living here was the social pressure. I'm a bit of a homebody.
Yeah.
There was a constant pressure to go out, do this, do that. It's Monday night. You got to go out and do this.
Right.
Tuesday night. Oh, now you got to go do this. It's Wednesday night. And it just became tiresome.
Yeah. I fall into that too. I'm the same way personality-wise. And what I hate is then it's almost like a disease you get infected with, where then if you don't go out, you start getting anxious about it and you start feeling bad about it, and for no particular reason.
Sure.
I was talking to somebody else, I forget who on this show, about, it was Wax Motif, who was saying that, he fell into that for like a year when he first moved here, where you think you're killing it and you think you're doing really well, but in reality, all you're doing is kind of going out to a club and partying.
You don't have much to show for it.
Yeah, that kind of squad mentality.
Some people thrive out here in this type of condition, but I think for me, I had my phone out here and I was okay with leaving.
Yeah, that's fair. You did your time. Where were you born, man? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Rome, Italy, actually. But
really?
Yeah, my parents were living there. My whole family was there for quite some time. But I think when I was 2 months old, they packed up and moved to America, and I grew up in Atlanta.
Okay. So did you know any of the other Atlanta guys, like when you were younger, that are in the DJ scene now, Mayhem or any of those guys?
Well, growing up, I didn't know Mayhem.
Yeah. Atlanta's a big city.
He's a bit younger than I am, and when I started DJing, though, I was actually living in Alabama, and so I was making road trips every week to Atlanta to buy records, and that's where I met Mayhem.
Okay.
So I have known him since he was, I think, 15 or 16.
Wow. So what was Atlanta like at that time growing up? What was your exposure to music? Was it a big part of your life as a kid?
Yeah, music was everything. My first real exposure to music outside of what you'd see on TV or hear on the radio was through my sister. She was heavily into punk rock. So when I was really young, I was exposed to bands like Dead Kennedys, Fugazi, the Dead Milkmen, Black Flag. So that was the first type of music I ever really heard or listened to.
What age was that approximately?
I was in about third or fourth grade.
Yeah.
I was really young and too young to be listening to some of that stuff.
Right.
But then shortly after that, I started listening to Two Live Crew. So it was kind of this weird juxtaposition
and one
styles.
could argue you were too young for that too.
Absolutely too young for that.
So how did you start playing instruments? Did you want to emulate it?
Yeah, so around the same time, about fourth or fifth grade, they had a music class at school, and I started the viola. I started playing the viola, and it just sparked the interest, I think, and I quickly asked my parents for a guitar. I think about 6 months later, I got a guitar, and from that moment on, I was involved
music.
it's just the only thing that I got with no effort.
Sure.
I didn't have to think about things. It just came naturally, and I embraced it from a
Did
really
you find
early
you
age.
had aptitude for it pretty early on too?
Yeah, I was playing by ear mostly. I didn't take lessons. I took, I think, maybe 4 or 5 guitar lessons in my life, but that was about 3 or 4 years into learning by myself and teaching myself. So at that point, I just wanted to learn how to solo and play Metallica songs and stuff that I just couldn't quite do on my own.
And playing in bands and all that, I assume.
Yeah, middle school was when I think I was in my first band. A punk band. I don't remember the name. I'm sure it was just some terrible name. But then I started a band called The Geeks.
That's
which
a good
is
name,
a 3-piece punk band, and I'm still friends with the guys I did that with as well.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, I eventually got a drum kit as well. I think that was closer to high school. So I mean, I played drums in a punk band. I played guitar in a punk ska band. I did all sorts of stuff back then. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you find out about electronic music? Do you remember?
College.
And where was that, Alabama?
Alabama,
Okay.
correct. I had decided that I would go with some friends to a party in Birmingham, Alabama, and I knew nothing of rave culture or anything aside from just stuff I'd pick up on from friends. It was honestly just an excuse to go party for me at the time. I was freshman in college. Anyhow, I wound up listening to DJ Diesel Boy do a drum and bass set, and it changed my life right there on the spot. It had the intensity of punk rock, and that's what I had been listening to, and it had the tempo, everything just kind of aligned perfectly, and it was something new, fresh. I didn't have anybody to play with in terms of playing in a band in Alabama, so it clicked right away.
Those moments are special, man. The first time you hear something that's really new that you've literally never heard before, and it has that kind of effect. I feel, I have a few of those moments for metal. I was a metalhead kid growing up, and for dance music too. I definitely have a couple like just embedded in my brain memories like that. Yep. And that feeling, I think that's personally what I get addicted to,
Yeah, and that's like what we're always chasing. The thing is you can't ever identify those moments when they're happening.
Right.
Obviously, or else it wouldn't be as special. But now looking back 20 years later, and I can remember when I saw DJ Dara drop Whiplash by Future Cut at Nike Pavilion in Atlanta in 1999 or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? I remember that moment so clearly, and now I can see how much of an impact it had on me. But at the time, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, and it's chasing that feeling is tough because you can't just sort of make the sound that gave you that feeling before. You have to.
It's deeper than that. It's a set of circumstances.
Yeah,
where you are in your life and what you're susceptible to, what you're open to hearing. I think, and also, I think a lot of it has to do with youth. Being younger.
Yeah,
I think some of the best things in music in general stem from the youth, not from older guys that have been doing it for a long time.
Absolutely, man.
So, there's just some magic there.
But, as we get older in the music industry and we're still doing what we love, how do we fit into that ecosystem if we're not the young guys anymore?
Well, I think for me personally, I have to look to the youth constantly. I'm always browsing through Twitter, trying to find people who don't have many followers, who are really talented producers, SoundCloud, things like that. And I'm trying to find these and see what's going on in the scene and find things to identify with and say, I don't fully understand what these guys are doing right here, but I like it. I like it remove even the music from it in a sense. I just like the movement. I like the attitude. I like that they don't give a shit can we cuss on here?
Oh, yeah.
I don't like that they care about what we think, the older guys.
Right.
They're just doing their own thing and they're creating an environment for themselves, and that is super inspiring to me. So
yeah, I agree, and I think you in particular, you've always collaborated and sort of put on a lot of younger artists. Like that's something I've noticed just watching your career, which I always thought was cool because I think some artists when they reach a certain level just won't go below that level.
Yeah, I mean for me it should always be about the music, right?
Yeah.
So whoever, if I'm working on a song with someone, I don't care if they're, established, if they're not established, I will link with them because I like their vision.
Yeah. And it keeps you young too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It really does, man.
Yeah. This whole game is funny because in some ways I think it ages you really fast, but then mentally I think I feel much younger.
I've said the same. I've said something similar before.
At a certain point, you have to figure out how to take care of yourself physically. But if you can get that down, which isn't easy, but if you can do it, I think mentally you'll see the benefits from kind of sticking around. So you're out in Alabama hearing this music for the first time and kind of having your mind blown. Was it an instant thing that you said, I want to be involved with this?
Yeah, instant. I think even the next day,
really,
I was trying to plot on how I was going to make some money so I could buy a drum machine. Because at the time, I thought that's what, electronic music, I need a drum machine.
Right, yeah, of course.
And plus, back at that point, the computers were being used, obviously, but it wasn't, you couldn't go buy a MacBook Pro in Ableton.
Right.
We were using Cubase on an old PC that took, 30 minutes to reverse a 10-second cymbal hit. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it was a bit more difficult. But anyhow, yeah, it was instant. And I got a drum machine. I learned the basics of it. And then I linked with a guy named Gigantor. Mm-hmm. He and I were just glued at the hip at that point.
Was he at your school? How'd you meet him?
Yeah, he was in Alabama, and he was already DJing, and he was already producing. He had been a rock and roll mix engineer for bands. He was very experienced and a great musician and a great guy. So he 100% showed me the ropes of how to produce on a computer. Right now, people who are listening, you could look him up as Computer Club,
right,
or Gigantor. Both. We had a project called Evil Intent.
I was going to say, yeah.
Me and him and AJ Treasure Fingers.
Yeah, I definitely want to get into that. I mean,
sure.
How long from when you first met Gigantor and started kind of being under his wing or learning from him, how long before you guys really, started doing something professionally, making money or making records or whatever it was?
Well, I was going to say, I thought you were going to ask when we started making tunes. And
well,
I was about to say
let's
that
start
night.
There.
Yeah, that night, literally, I think we started our first song, and it was called Take That. And that wound up being our first release on Evil Intent Recordings. So we put everything together quickly. He held my hand through the process, and we did a couple songs as Nick and Gigantor and released them on Evil Intent Recordings. And then we met AJ, a.k.a. Treasure Fingers. Right. He was living in Oklahoma at the time, making really cool drum and bass. And we said, can we release that? Next thing you know, we put out one of his tunes, and then we said, why don't we all just move to Atlanta together, start Evil Intent?
Yeah.
That's a little bit sloppy on the timeline, a little bit, but that's the gist of it.
Sure, yeah. Well, and it's interesting to me, talk a little bit about the difference just in the electronic music scene in America at that time, because I think, for a kid who just starts now, the first thought wouldn't be to immediately make your own label and, sign people and that kind of stuff. And so talk a little bit about how the landscape was different.
I think for us, it was, we had something similar, and that was our punk music background. So we were well-versed in DIY ethics and, how to operate on your own, do-it-yourself label. So I think we didn't put too much thought behind the label process. We just said, let's start a record label. There weren't many drum and bass labels in America, period.
Right, so there weren't a lot of outlets just for what you were doing.
I mean, the major cities, San Francisco had Funkatech, LA had a scene, New York had a scene, but, for us, there wasn't much going on. There weren't many well-known drum and bass producers.
Right.
Now, EDM, or I guess it wasn't called EDM then, but electronic music as a whole at the time was doing well. Nowhere near as popular as it is now, but there's still, good parties going on.
Yeah, and I mean, in the late 90s, I think that was sort of a smaller explosion, a little micro explosion versus the one we had now, because back then there was, the Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers, and for a minute MTV was playing.
They played Ronnie Size.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. For those of us who lived through that little bubble, it's been really interesting to see.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's insane. I mean, it's nothing at all like it used to be, but that's not a bad thing.
No,
I'm not one of those guys that's going to say, it was better when I was a kid. This is just not true,
Well, I mean, if it hadn't blown up like it did, I mean, would we even have these careers? Would we even be able to sit here?
No. And I mean, anything, I'm a fan of evolution. Anything that's evolving, like let it evolve how it needs to evolve, and don't try to stifle its growth. And that goes for an artist, a scene, an industry, whatever. you know?
Yeah. What was going on in your life at that time? I mean, at that point, did you think music was going to be a career? Were you still concentrating on school and doing it as a side thing? Sort of what point were you at when you were starting the label?
I had no cares in the world, and I definitely didn't care about school at the time. I mean, I was 100% just devoted to following music and seeing, and I had no plan. I'm kind of tripping myself up because I'm thinking about putting myself in my own shoes at that time and how careless I was about it. But that's what I needed to do at the time.
Right.
I had to devote myself to learning the craft 24/7, just like I had done with learning how to play guitar before that. I would sit in my room all day learning how to play a Metallica song.
Yeah.
Now I was sitting there just practicing mixing records all day long.
That's what you were doing at that time?
Yeah, I was practicing mixing. Like we were throwing little small local parties in Alabama, and just at night I would go to Gigantor's studio and we would produce. And
Sure.
then, like I said earlier, then we moved to Atlanta, and that's when things kind of went more into professional level, where we started getting booked, in different cities.
Yeah.
and able to fly to a show.
And at that
get
point,
paid.
it was Evil Intent?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
Evil Intent. And then, that was 2001, 2002.
Do you remember any early shows, like some of those first bookings?
I remember our first major booking was in New York at Direct Drive, opening for DJ Pish Posh, which is a drum and bass guy from New York. And Direct Drive was a weekly drum and bass event. So for us, three guys from Alabama, Atlanta area, to be able to play in New York City was a big deal for us. They said no money, no flights, no hotels. If you can get here, you can play.
Yeah.
So we pressed, I think, like 100 CDs of all of our music in mixed format. We went up there, played the show, had a good show, handed out every single CD, got in the car and drove right back, all in one run. We drove up there. I think it was 14 hours off. They just played, got in the car, 16 hours back, didn't get a hotel. And that's what I would call paying your dues.
Yeah.
And
that's some real punk shit.
We had a series of gigs like that, where a year or so where we were paying our dues, and that's something that I have seen kind of disappear in a sense from the scene. It's not very easy. It's easier now to write one good tune and have a decent, image or brand behind it, and then shoot to the top.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just something that you needed an A&R person and this and that at that point to do it.
The whole thing is just a little more luxurious now.
It's packaged. It's
and I'm trying to be careful to not use negative words because I don't think it's any better or worse than it was before, but it's just
kind
different.
of just calling it like you see it. I mean, there's clearly a difference.
Yeah.
And these days, branding, it takes a huge part of what makes a successful artist. I
Was
guess.
that at all in your head
No.
when you were doing Evil Intent?
Not at all. No, not at all. I mean, we did all our own graphic design through AJ. Everything, like I said, it was all DIY.
Yeah.
So no, it was just about building a fan base and making the music that we wanted to make, and that's it. You know? And when people started paying attention to us, not just fans, but our peers. Because like I said, there weren't many people in America doing drum and bass. There was guys like Hive, UFO, like I said, Funkatech Crew,
Right.
Violence, Gridlock, all these great producers, and to get their recognition, even if it wasn't necessarily a friendship, it was just some sort of stamp of recognition. That's
Yeah.
what we were working towards at the time,
Well,
like a set of goals.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong because you're much more in the scene and from the scene than I ever was. But to me, drum and bass was all about respect of the craft and about technical mastery. And people would really appreciate the art on kind of a technical level, like they understood what would go into making a really good song.
Yeah.
I guess it's just one of the earliest genres to really appreciate the producer.
Yeah, it really was. I mean, it was all about writing a mix for 2 minutes.
Yeah.
The quality of the mix down. But that kind of came with groups like Pendulum and Noisia. That's when things really started to change, not just in drum and bass, but in all genres of dance music, because they redefined what it means to have a good mix down.
You're right.
They really did. They introduced snare drums into a scene that was dominated by kick drums, and rock and roll mix downs and this and that, and it changed everything. But I might have kind of just jumped away from what we were talking about, but it's
yeah,
still relative.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an interesting thing to think about. I remember talking to Mayhem about, because he was involved with some of those early Noisia releases. And he was saying, even then their mix downs were not great when they sent him the original demos. And then to see how far they've taken it and just turned into a leader. I was inspired to hear that because, I think we forget and anyone coming up that everyone sucks at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you can really work and do whatever it is that you feel like you can't do, Did you enjoy that process going from not knowing how to do something to do something? Was the discovery and all that fun for you?
It was fun, but also, frustrating because I was competent as a musician already. I already knew how to play guitar. I was a drummer. I understood music in a deep way, but I couldn't get that idea out. I didn't know how to process a sound. I didn't know how to make a dirty Reese bass, or didn't know how to EQ amen drums. It was a process, and to be honest, I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, of course, and at all levels of the game, everyone's still trying to get better.
It's eager,
eager,
excited, but more just eager to get over the hump and get better and better and better and better.
Yeah, once you get to that point where you can have an idea in your head and understand how to translate that quickly into, onto the computer, into Ableton or whatever you're using, that's a pretty good feeling. And that's something, even personally, I felt like only in the last couple of years.
Anytime I finish a solo track just all by myself, I pat myself on the back and I say, I don't know how I did it. I didn't think that this was going to get finished, at all. I had pretty much given up on it. And then
Are you always that way? Because I'm very much that way. That by the end of a song, I couldn't even really tell you how I got there.
Yes, I am that way. I put out a tune this year called Reality, and that song had 10 different drops from when I started to, the intro is the same and the breakdowns were kind of the same, the vibes, and I just could not get a drop that I was happy with because I said, this is too convoluted, this is too dubsteppy, this is too trappy, this blah, 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 and just keep going. I give up finally. Wait, what's that? I accidentally did something cool. That's the thing. It's like happy accidents.
Right.
Any producer who has any shred of credibility will admit to you that most of their best things came from an accident.
Yeah, well, and you were talking about trying all these different ideas. At a certain point, you can overthink it too, right?
Yeah.
And then it's just a lost cause.
Well, for me, lately, I've actually kind of started to toss away a lot of the stuff that I learned early on. A good example would be the last 5 years, I've used a spectrum analyzer on everything that I work on. And then I realized I'm limiting myself by what something looks like.
Right.
I should be closing the computer screen, not looking deeper into it and trying to figure out the perfect frequency of this. And it ruined it for me. It really did. Ruin the fun for a while. And so I deleted them. I just deleted them all off my computer. And I don't use them, and my tunes lately have sounded much better to me.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because I'm not trying to make them perfect. I'm not trying so hard. I'm just making the song, and then I can go in and EQ it and fix things up as I need to. But I've tried to cut away a little bit of what's between myself and the computer.
Yeah, well, and you had said earlier that you learned by ear, and that that was kind of how you first came to music. So maybe in a way, that's sort of getting back to that more instinctual.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
alive kind of accidents happen. And it could even come down to coming up with a synth line. I may just say, well, I don't want to use Serum or Massive. I'm just going to load a vocal in here and then time stretch it and then pitch it down 12 and run it through a saturator and then filter it and then resample it. And then all of a sudden I get this weird noise.
Yeah.
Oh, I hear a pattern there.
Yeah,
that's where the fun stuff happens.
Yeah, the chasing those ideas. That's definitely a fun part for me. Is you just get on. It's like you hop on a track for 10 minutes and you just take that ride and see where it ends up without worrying about it too much. That's something I learned from Jake, Kill the Noise, too. About
Jake will push stuff so far. I've worked with him so much over the years on different things, and the one thing about Jake when you're working in the studio with him is that he'll do something and you'll say, oh my God, that's so sick. And then he just keeps tweaking it. And you're like, oh shit, he it's gone.
Right.
And he just keeps going. He's like, no, No. Just keeps going. 20 minutes later, he's just got the nastiest, craziest thing you've ever heard because he pushed himself to that point. And that's I definitely took a page out of his book on that. you know.
just not being satisfied with just a good idea.
You gotta be standing out of your chair. You got to be laughing and walking around the room going, oh shit, like that's sick. If you're not, then you are kind of settling, I feel like.
Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes if you just get a good idea, something that sounds good after struggling for a while, that's a good feeling, right? And so you feel like,
Still not good enough.
Right, exactly. You can fall into the trap of just being like, okay, I solved the problem, I can relax now. But yeah, you're right. It's those moments where if you just took that extra 10% or that extra half hour and really pushed it after you had the good idea, yeah, that is kind of when the magic can happen. Or even to take it even a little further, or if you just stay in the studio 30 minutes longer than you want to.
That's another thing. Yeah, absolutely. When you're in a creative rut, which seems to happen for so many people I know, and it's understandable, especially in today's world with all the distractions. But, I've found that the only cure for that creative block is to get in the studio and just keep working. Even if you're making stuff that you hate and you keep getting pissed off at yourself and you say, God, why do I suck? What am I doing? Just keep doing it. Keep making that shitty song. Just see it through. Because you never know. You might accidentally, or you might just stumble upon an idea or a fill in that stupid idea that you say, wait, that one tiny little thing right there sounds like the main riff to a song that I could make.
Right. And
then bam, you've got it. You got it back, and then you're back in the groove. But you have to work through so much.
Yeah,
as
and
a
it's
producer
mental
sometimes.
and emotional work too, right? Because for me, if I'm stuck in the studio and I leave for the day and I didn't fix it or I didn't get anything I liked, then I leave in a bad mood and I come back, sort of expecting that same thing to happen, right?
Sure.
And you get in these ruts. I think about that all the time. Sometimes you almost have to trick yourself into getting out of it, and whether that's just forcing yourself to still stay there, or
for me, that's what it takes. I just, that can mean 5 days in a row of just feeling like I need to retire and call it a day and sell beach chairs. But it always works out if you just keep pushing yourself.
Yeah.
If you got the talent to do it, and if you've done it before, there's no reason you can't do it again.
Sure. Well, we've been talking about you forming Evil Intent, and we were talking about your collaborations with different people, Jake and others. Do you like that collaborative environment? Is that helpful for your creative process?
Yeah. It took me a long time to figure out that I do like to collaborate. Bro Safari for me was something that it's almost as if I was proving something to myself.
That you could do it.
That I could do it myself, because I'd only worked as a collaborator in the past.
Right.
Evil Intent was a trio. Before that was all bands. I'd never done a solo, quote unquote solo project. So in a sense, it was kind of like proving to myself I could do it. But I really do enjoy working with other people. I feel like I think it's important to work with other people.
Yeah.
Even for a solo artist, it's good to step out sometime and work with other people, because that's where inspiration comes from, new ideas. No one has all of the ideas.
Right. And we can always be better too. There's this idea that if you're a solo artist, it has to be your pure vision, which, I respect that. That's cool. But even those solo artists with this pure vision, they're still getting criticism from their friends, even if those friends aren't making the songs. There's always input, and we can always push ourselves to be better. It's something, personally, it took me a long time to accept, too.
And I always want that feeling to watch somebody do something in Ableton that I say, I didn't know that you could do that.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. There's
absolutely.
Nothing
I mean, that's just adding to our little bag of tricks, right?
Yeah, so that helps with the learning aspect. But in terms of just fulfilling a creative void or whatever, I like working with people, especially people like Jake, or UFO, who's my number one collaborating partner.
Right. Do you think in those early days of Evil Intent with you and AJ and Gigantor, did you all kind of get better faster in that kind of environment?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, it's a hive mind type thing. I mean, anything that I learned and I put into a file, that file was passed on to Mike or AJ, and they would work on it. And there's, whether they like it or not, they're going to get influenced by something that I did there, or vice versa.
Yeah. So how did it take off a little bit for Evil Intent? Because for a few years there, you guys were, traveling a fair amount, right?
Yeah, we did.
Releasing a lot of records.
Released a lot of that. I mean, that's really what it was. Is we were putting out a lot of records, and we the fact that we did it ourselves, I think, won us the respect of our peers. The fact that we didn't ask for handouts, we didn't ask to get on a label, we did it all
Right.
ourselves. So from there, we started catching the ears of people in the UK, and being that drum and bass is from the UK, that's the motherland of drum and bass.
Right.
So labels that I had just been infatuated with, like Renegade Hardware, for example, all of a sudden they wanted to put out an EP of ours, and that had been a goal from when we started it. For like I mentioned earlier, my first exposure to drum bass was Diesel Boy.
Right.
When I started DJing, I was saying, like, I'm going to meet that guy one day. Like, I'm going to meet him. And now we're friends. You know what I
Right.
mean? That was one goal, knocked down. And then another one was release an EP on Renegade Hardware. We did it. And so it was, as a young man, it was very comforting to know that if you believe in something and you really want it that bad, and you're not overthinking it, you're just doing,
Yeah.
you can pretty much get whatever you want.
Yeah.
I had a very specific list of goals that we just smashed.
Well, and that's
quick.
great. I think that's super valuable for any young producer, is to, even if it's just sort of a hippie vision board kind of thing, to really.
Dude, that stuff is real, man.
Yeah. Just, put it in your mind. It's not something you have to think about every day, but just put it out there.
Yeah, it's just something that I wanted, and that I said, not just that I want, but I know I'm capable. It may not be
Right.
easy, but I know that I can do this, so I'm going to put everything into it.
Yeah. And so from the time when you guys really started traveling around, you were all in at this point, I take it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there ever any early doubts about, this thing being a full-time thing, either from you or from your family or any outside influence?
No, my family's always been very supportive, and that I'm super lucky in that regard.
Yeah, that's
but,
huge.
I think my biggest thing at the time was, this is all fun and great, but I don't want to be a 40-year-old DJ.
So even then you were thinking
I said
about
to
that.
myself, I don't want to be a 40-year-old DJ. And guess what? I'm 38.
Kicking
And
up
you know
there.
what? And now I think, holy shit, I'm so lucky to be a 40-year-old
Right.
DJ. Because, I mean, granted, I don't see this being I'm not going to do this the rest of my life. I'm
Yeah.
already working towards other things now. But what an incredible ride it has been, and I'm very fortunate, and I
yeah.
recognize that. And what at the time I thought, I don't want to be some old dude, like, which is funny that I used the number 40, like, and now
Right.
38-year-old me is looking at 20-year-old me and saying, "Go fuck yourself, man."
Basically, yeah. Well, it's always funny. This is not related to anything, but if you're in the club and someone's like, "How old are you?" and I'm 35, so I'll say 35, and depending on their age,
You don't look 35.
right. It's always that, and if they're too young, it's like they can't even conceive.
They're like,
of
"Yeah,
that.
right.
Yeah.
How old are you really?"
Yeah, it's just bizarre.
I know.
But it is. I mean, it's a young person scene, right? Like we
It
are
is.
the outsiders now.
Yes, I said the same thing recently. So, like we're just old men in a young man's game. We're dinosaurs of this scene.
Yeah.
So we should be lucky that we're still relevant in any form.
This is maybe a loaded question, but is our experience as, somebody who's been in the game for 10, 20 years, what is that worth in 2017, It's something I wonder about for myself because, experience is great. Like it gives you wisdom to deal with situations, whether it's business or your workflow, anything like that. But then I also wonder if it holds me back in some ways because I'm too stuck in old patterns.
Well, that's up to you, right? I mean, see, so for me personally, I make it a point to not let myself get some sort of ego where I'm better than a 19-year-old who's just learning this because
Right.
that's not true. And the minute you start thinking like that, you're done.
Yeah.
You're done evolving.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So, I mean, for me, it just boils down to the person, right? I mean, I think you asked the question, what is it worth in 2017? I think it's worth a whole hell of a lot if somebody's willing to listen to what you have to say and somebody asks the right questions, because there's no denying the fact that we've seen a lot of shit. We've seen the scene come and go. I've seen literally the birth and death of a music genre in my, I can look at things that some of these younger artists are doing and may think to myself, oh, I want to tell them not to do that because it's going to end their career. I can tell them right now, but who am I to do that?
Right, yeah.
So I said, it just depends on who's listening and what question you ask.
Sure. When you talked about, the birth and death of a scene, how, as far as your first group with Evil Intent, how did that, well, first of all, what do you think kind of the peak of the group was? Like when you felt like you were really just killing it?
I think Well, is there a second part?
The second part is, what was the decline and how did that chapter kind of come to, not a close,
Sure.
but, how did it
Well,
wind down?
I think the period that I kind of spoke about with where we were releasing with UK labels and we were touring in Europe, that was definitely the peak. 3 guys from Alabama able to start a successful drum.
amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It was all cool and surreal. And we're still together. I need to point that out.
Right.
Actually,
That's why I didn't want to say came to a close.
Yeah, because Gigantor and I were just working on a new tune this last week and a half. So
Nice.
we're still making music. But nevertheless, it's, it doesn't take any sort of wizard to see that I'm not as much a part of that as I am Bro Safari.
Right.
So I think for me, things started to decline a bit when I just got kind of bored with the monotony of making drum and bass. And then the scene was very toxic at the time. It was very toxic. I didn't
In what way?
The internet. And there's so much politics in drum and bass, and all of music there is, but drum and bass in particular, especially with the the difference between UK and US, and it just got to a point where I was just kind of over it, and
Yeah.
I wanted to get out my guitar. I wanted to play other stuff, and so I spent a good year and a half just doing nothing really, except just messing around in my studio, just making whatever I wanted to make.
At that point, did you have in your mind that you were just going to make a new project or you were going to keep doing something music-wise?
Funny enough, I was living in LA at the time, so I felt like I was doing something, but I wasn't.
Right.
I mean, I was making enough money to survive.
Off
still
of the records?
off DJing. Still, we were still doing shows here
Okay.
and there, and I did another side project with Jake Killanoise called Ludacris. We were doing
Yeah.
stuff like that, and I had actually started Bro Safari already, but I wasn't really pursuing it in any serious form or fashion.
Before we get into Bro Safari, just really quickly, I do want to talk about the Ludacris project, just because
sure.
I love that project so much. Well, first of all, talk about when you first met Jake back in the day. What was he like when you were just working with him in the drum and bass days?
He's the same now as he was then,
Okay.
but he was just more unfiltered, and probably drank more, and
Yeah.
But so all of us were the same way.
Yeah.
He's the same.
He's one of my favorite
always
people.
been. Yeah, he's always been one of my favorite people because there's nobody like him, and he's so fucking intelligent.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing when I first met him. I didn't expect that the level of depth to come from him.
Right.
I don't know why. Maybe it's just like I had a stigma, upstate New York kid, just kind of an asshole to people.
Sure, yeah.
But then you get to know him and you realize he's a very smart guy, very deep, has a lot of great things to say. So, knowing him then and now, like I said, he's the same.
Yeah.
He's the same guy. And that's what makes him so great is that he does not change. He doesn't
Right.
bend for
Right.
the only time he's going to change is when he wants to change himself.
Yeah,
That's
which is a lesson
admirable.
we could all take. Yeah, and so the Ludacris project. How did you guys? Was it just kind of a joke to start off with?
Yeah,
just fucking around. In the
I know.
Studio?
I was living here in LA already, and he was visiting. I'm pretty sure. We were in my living room. I remember this. I remember it very well. I had already started the very beginning of Bangfest, the first Ludacris mix. I'd already started, I think, the first 3 minutes just because I was just messing around on a laptop with Ableton and mashups. And then he heard it and he just thought it was hilarious. And he and I have a very similar sense of humor, especially in the studio. And he started on the second half of the mix. So then we immediately were like, okay, cool, let's do this. Let's make a mashup project. And we're sitting in my living room and he was looking through iTunes and somebody mislabeled a Ludacris record, Ludacris.
Okay.
And we both looked at it and said, Ludacris. That's there. Boom. There we go. I think for a while we were going to call it like the Axel Foley because that was the original.
Right.
Dun.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but yeah, that's how it started.
Man, and
As a joke.
well, right, and and it was a humor-based project kind of through and through, right?
Sure.
But what I liked about it was that you guys treated it the same.
Yeah, it was
you
very
know?
technical.
Yeah, it was technical, and I mean, you guys actually played at least a few shows with it, right?
Yeah.
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 That was so cool to me, man.
That was fun, man. I've never had as much fun in the studio as I did when
Really?
we were working on those mixes. Yeah. And putting together live shows. It was that's what it should be, right?
Right.
Obviously it's not always you're always gonna be having a great old time in the studio, but that was definitely the most fun
Sure, man.
in terms of sessions.
Yeah, and just the fact that you could put humor and levity into music and still treat it seriously and have it taken seriously.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not much of that in dance music. I mean, there's maybe happy songs, but
It's like tongue in cheek.
Right, yeah, to actually have that. I enjoyed it. I don't know if you ever heard, me and Kurt Flostradamus had a project called Laugh Factory. It was very much in the same vein.
I want to hear it.
Oh yeah, I'll send it to you, man. It was like using, internet video samples, and it was like a little after Ludacris, but just sort of the evolution of that idea.
I mean, I sometimes I think about that now is if we had started that now, there's so much more material to work with because now it's not just about music. Now,
Right.
I mean, meme culture, viral video culture. Like you could make you could put together a mixtape that just covers all of these bases.
It's actually not a bad idea.
Well, we've
man.
talked about doing more Ludacris. It just every time we've gotten together to do it, I think we kind of not butt heads, but I don't think we have the same idea of where Ludacris should go.
Sure.
So I think for both of us, it's kind of like, well, if it's not coming together naturally, then no worries. We both got our own thing going, and we'll come back to it when the time is right.
Of course, man. And it makes sense, you guys have gone on to have these huge solo careers, and I think it makes sense that when you're working closely with a friend that you see every day or whatever the situation was, that's, then you have your own language, your own humor.
Yeah.
It makes sense that's when you
I would love to go back to it though.
I would love it if you did, man.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we've talked about it. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
He had a kid.
Right.
I've got a kid.
You've got a kid,
it's there's stuff going on.
It happens. And so, going back to LA, when you were here and kind of Evil Intent slowed down, you were making, songs with your guitar, kind of just letting it flow.
Yeah.
I was listening last night when I knew I was going to talk to you to the old Bro Safari SoundCloud. I did a deep dive.
Oh, wow.
And some of the early stuff I had no idea that was under Bro Safari was kind of this really interesting, like deep, glitchy, dubby stuff.
Yeah, and that's SoundCloud. I had a MySpace page before that,
Sure.
and that had 4 other songs that I've lost. I can't find them. I don't know where they are.
Really?
I say that and I haven't really looked too hard for them, but I just mean on my computers. I haven't ever been able to find them. But yeah, I made like an EP when I first started Bro Safari, and it was just glitchy dubstep, weird, just weird stuff. And I had written the 4 songs, and I said, oh well, I need a name for this, and then I came up with Bro Safari and just put them up on MySpace as a thing.
Yeah.
That's the last I thought of it until I heard Moombahton.
Interesting. Do you remember when you heard that? And
Moombahton?
Yeah.
The first song I think that I can recall hearing is Munchie's remix of Firepower.
Yeah,
That's sick.
huge.
Because it had that same kind of just punk rock energy that drum and bass had. Leave it to Munchie to do that, by the way, because he has the same influences that I did.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if there ever was a punk still left in dance music, it's got to be him, man. Yeah.
Like it was sick. So that immediately I said, okay, like I've found something that I'm inspired by, and I just started doing my own thing. And I wrote The Worm, and somehow Diplo got a hold of it. Like he always does.
That, yeah.
and I think he tweeted at me, and I was like, holy shit, like what? Because we're skipping a large gap of time where I was very unsure of what I was going to do with my life.
Well, that was kind of what I was trying to get at earlier is, in that period, because we all go through those periods in our life, in our careers, right, where things slow down or you just kind of lose your way for a minute. At that time, what was running through your head? Were you thinking about, doing something else entirely? Was it an anxious time?
It was, well, I mean, for me, I found out I was going to be a dad.
Well, that's
I was living here, and I found out I was going to be a father, and I said, okay, I need to move to be with the mother.
Right, out to Austin.
Well, it's San Antonio actually
Okay.
at the time, so I moved to San Antonio to be with her, and I kept having conversations with her. What am I going to do? I can't support. I can't do this with what I'm doing now. Evil Intent isn't really paying bills, and I don't have anything else.
Right. Puts everything into focus real quick.
And I remember she and I were sitting on our balcony one night, and I'd kind of put it out there like this. either I give this one chance and I really go for it, or I go back to school, I get a job. We talked it back and forth. What's the benefits of both? And then I kept coming back to this thing where I was thinking, I don't want to be older. I don't want to be 60, 70, or how, God willing, however old and then say, why didn't I go for it? That's one of those things that I had the foresight to say, this is a bad idea. If all I've ever known is music. How am I supposed to go get a job? I mean, yeah, sure, I can go to school. I could do that.
Right.
But that's not what I wanted to do.
Right.
So, and she got behind me 100%, and she gave me the courage to do it.
That's so valuable, man.
So, yeah, I mean, having a support system is everything.
Yeah.
And she's always been that for me. So
it's so important, man.
It's everything. I mean, if everyone around you is like, you're all right, you suck. Like, what are you going to be? What are you going to do with your life? Because there are people who do have those kind of influence around. Like, how are you going to be a DJ, or how are you going to be a painter, or how are you going to write a book? That does nobody any good. So luckily, I haven't had to deal with that.
Yeah.
So around that time, again, I was just very unsure of everything.
Right.
So like I said, when Diplo comes, and I'd been watching all my friends doing well. Like Jake, he started Kill the Noise, and I was like, wow, he just completely reinvented himself out of the gate. After being bitter about that for a while, like watching all my friends, I was like, how dare they be popular and do good? Everybody goes through that thing at some point, and then you learn your lesson.
100%.
I'm not like that anymore. Yeah, I just kind of applied what I'd learned from watching them, the dedication and the hard work they put into redefining who they are as artists.
Right.
I just,
And that's the thing, right? Is that anytime because it's easy to see somebody rise quickly or see somebody get something you want and say, why'd they get that instead of me? But if you actually figure out why they got it instead of you, that's something.
Because they wanted it.
Well, sure. and what I'm saying is, if you figure out what they did differently than you, there's a reason they got it and you didn't get it. And if you can use that to better your own self and better your own career, right? That's just another tool in your arsenal.
100%.
Yeah. And so those early days of Moombahton, it seemed like, at least when I first, because I think I knew of Evil Intent, but I didn't really necessarily know that it was you and AJ. And it was the Moombahton days when I knew of you as a person, as
sure.
Nick.
Yeah,
and
I remember.
Yeah,
DC.
yeah. That's when we first met, I think.
I remember hanging out in DC before a U-Haul show.
Oh, yeah. I remember that, too.
Went to some little, cheesesteak spot,
random,
I know, but I remember.
No, I forgot
that.
I was going to say, I remember us being in the booth one of those nights in U-Haul.
Yeah.
It was one of those nights where 10 DJs were playing or something, which was another fun part of the early Moombahton crowd, right?
Yeah.
It was just a party and this amazing social group of people.
Very punk.
Yeah, very punk and just connected by this weird sound.
All of us were, man.
Yeah,
you,
100%.
me, Nadastrom, Valentino, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, obviously I could keep going.
I still remember those days, man. Those parties were some of the most fun events too.
Yeah.
It was what we were saying earlier, a new sound, right?
Exactly.
And the excitement of...
And it's very raw, uncut, no rules. Again, I keep bringing back this punk rock thing.
Right.
And it's always been this thing that's lurking in the background of everything I've done. Everything that I've ever gotten into with all my heart has kind of had this kind of punk rock thing going on behind it.
Yeah, yeah. And that makes total sense.
Maybe there's a better word for it than punk. But
DIY.
Yeah, it's just very raw, like I said, youthful, very just full of life and no rules.
Yeah, and I mean,
hearing
you talk about it makes sense that you would gravitate towards that Moombahton thing, which was invented more or less by accident by Dave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Happy accidents, man. We're back there.
Exactly.
It seemed like you were pretty successful in that genre pretty quickly. Would you agree with that?
I would agree.
It took a long time to get there.
Yeah, it's all relative. It was a small scene, but within that scene, I felt like I did a good job of representing myself and the sound and kind of putting my own twist on it, yeah.
Or I guess just that's how a lot of people first heard the name Bro Safari.
Yes.
Was through that
Oh,
scene.
yeah, for sure. That's how I got my start. And it was because, I was putting out packaged EPs. I was doing Moombahton themed mixes, and I had a cool logo by accident. And,
right.
So
and now we're back to the idea of branding, which do you think that was the first time in your career that you really kind of used that as part of your arsenal or thought about it a lot?
I mean, I didn't think about it when I made the logo. That's the thing. I made the logo when I did those 4 glitchy dubstep songs. I've had that logo for years and years before anybody heard of Bro Safari. But when it came time to play a show, I needed an image for the flyer, and I said, "Here, just use this face," because why not?
Right.
And then it became a thing, and then obviously it dawned on me that I had a great branding thing going on, but only when people really mentioned it.
Right.
So I'm aware that my branding had a huge part to do with like what set me apart from others early on, but I somewhat resent it a little bit
Right.
because I'm not a fan of the branding culture that we're currently like entrenched in right now. But at the same time, I don't want to be that guy. Like,
Right.
"Oh, you can't have a brand." Like,
Well, and you
that's-
don't want to
that's
shoot
dumb.
yourself in the
Everybody's
foot.
always had a brand. Look at Black Flag, the greatest punk band of all time, arguably has a like an iconic
Extremely
image.
identifiable, yeah.
And so branding exists for a reason.
Right.
But I think that's the difference maybe, is that, the branding for a band like Black Flag was about like they were just writing something on a wall that was easy for them to write that everybody was like, yeah, Black Flag.
Yeah,
But then today you
utilitarian.
might run into some acts that they just craft it from the ground floor up, and it's not about the music, it's about the brand, and that's where I start getting resentful of that. I gotta like
Yeah.
walk a fine line there.
100%, man.
Yeah.
And you're not alone in feeling that
Yeah.
way. Even the people who have those very calculated brands, I think some of them realize that can't be the only thing they do, because that to me is a short-term
Yeah.
success, right? And long-term, no guarantee.
It's all about
of
the
suc-
music long
Right.
term. If you don't have the goods, then whatever, you're a flash in the pan. If you're a good producer, if you're a good artist, musician, if then you have longevity. You have
Sure.
the potential to have longevity.
Yeah, and if you have a great brand on top of that, then you
cool.
know,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're fantastic.
So I think that's kind of like you're hitting at the root of my issues with it. Is if the music's not there, then I'm chuckling to myself.
I mean,
about
is
it,
that, obviously in the culture we're living in 2017, it is much more about branding, right? And there are lots of these people who are kind of blowing up quickly off of these brands. Do you think that's actually having any kind of like a serious negative effect? Or do you just think it's kind of just a phase that'll,
I think it's
pass
both.
by? Yeah.
Both, perhaps. I mean, I think it is a phase. I don't think it does damage, other than it may restrict someone who might otherwise be a really great artist. It might restrict them from putting too much attention towards their brand, and when they could have spent that extra 5 hours working on a song, or
That's a good point. Yeah.
I hate the idea of a 10-year-old kid out there who listens to whoever. They're sitting there thinking like, oh, well, what can I look like?
Yeah.
It's like, wait a second, what do you sound like?
But this is getting further and further into just the culture of today, right? In the social media culture, and that a 10-year-old now has a smartphone, maybe, and maybe they have an Instagram, and maybe, at this point in their young life, they're already very concerned with how they're perceived, and they already understand how to put out an image of themselves, right? That may
dude.
not be their real image.
I mean, I often think how hard it must be to be a kid these days. You have multiple versions of yourself, right? You have the version of yourself that only you know, the private you. You have the version of yourself that goes on social media, which is not like the version of you that
Right.
And then you have the version of yourself that's IRL, friends, like when you're out with your friends hanging out.
Right.
That's different from your social you and the personal you. And then you've got the one that exists with your family.
Right.
And you're managing all these different psychologically, that's got to be doing lasting damage.
I mean, do you think about that? You have a child,
Yeah.
is that a
He's
big...
still too young to really have an ego. So I think once ego comes into it, that's when it becomes a problem.
Do you try to protect him from screens or social media or anything like that?
I think it would be stupid to protect him from
Yeah.
it, because this is the future. I'm not fighting the future,
Right.
but it's more about teaching him the lessons of like basic lessons in life.
Yeah.
The golden rule: treat others as you'd want to be treated, and
Yeah.
things like that. I really try my best to instill those kind of lessons into him early on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want him to ever think that it's okay to make fun of somebody, period.
Right.
Because you wouldn't want anybody to make fun of you. You
Right.
know? parenting, I don't know what I'm doing, man. But
Yeah.
but all I can think is just try to make a human that's not going to grow up to be an asshole.
Yeah.
That's really like your job as
Great
a parent,
goal.
right?
Great
just
goal.
raise somebody who's not an asshole.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we can do a whole nother podcast about parenting.
Yeah,
But yeah,
no shit.
it flies through my mind every once in a while. And so getting back to, the Moombahton days and Bro Safari kind of being a known artist at this point, you mentioned that, Diplo picked up on it really early. Did you guys work together? Did you collaborate with him at some point? Or am I making that up?
No, we did. We worked on a kind of trap style tune that was actually really good at the time. I liked it a lot. And I think Iggy Azalea was going to get on it or something. It was one of those things, in the music industry, something is supposed to happen and it just kind of doesn't. And then she did wind up using it on something and this and that, so I don't even remember the details of the release at this point, but it was a great experience nevertheless.
Sure. Well, and it's funny, I think people, just listeners of the music, don't always understand. They're like, "Well, you work together. Why didn't the song come out? Or if it exists, why won't you put it out?" And it's hard to explain kind of the intricacies of just getting together with someone, making something, both deciding that it's finished, then to decide how to jointly release it. If there's a vocalist, like you said, it's another layer. Everybody has their own management with their own schedules, and
it depends also on this, the stature of the artists, I guess, collaborating.
Sure.
Because, somebody like Diplo doesn't need a collab with Bro Safari.
Right.
But at the time, Bro Safari, I didn't need it, but I mean,
Wouldn't hurt.
It helped. It way more beneficial to me than to him.
Sure.
So it makes sense to me why, he might say, "Oh, this is cool, but it's not quite cool enough." And to be clear, that's not what happened here. I'm just saying in generalizations of comparing two artists working together. Who has the most to gain? The one who has the least to gain is usually the one who's like putting the kibosh on stuff.
Right, exactly.
Like, nah, I don't think this is coming out.
Well, and that's a common thing you see too, that then the smaller artist, in some cases, maybe did more of the work, or just, put more effort into it because it meant more or it would mean more to them.
Well, like we talked about, I mean, I try to work with younger producers all the time.
Right.
And I try my best to not have a situation come up like that where I feel like, wait a second, I'm not trying to just steal this guy's creative mojo and just make a tune out of his ideas. Like right now I'm working with this guy, Pastat. He's here in LA. We're going to debut a song tonight at the show. We've been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And what he sent me originally to work on, I was like, oh, okay, cool. I hear some ideas. Did my thing, changed around the intro, sent it back, left the drop. And then he worked on it more, sent it back. And it was a true collaboration.
Yeah.
And it was me saying to myself, like, I have to push myself. Keeps me young, like you were saying earlier.
Right.
Keeps me on my toes. And I'm learning, from younger producers, the way they arrange their sounds, the way that they're, processing their synths or this or that.
And there's always more to learn, right? I mean, the way that a 19-year-old kid is going to produce a song is going to be very different from how I'm going to produce a song, just because of the way we learned it, right?
Yeah. Like I said, I feel like I've intentionally been like knocking myself down a few pegs in terms of production capabilities or resources rather.
Yeah, just
like
taking things out of the sandbox.
Just making it a little more about reminding yourself that it's about the music.
Yeah, and I think that's a great lesson too, is, it's easy to get caught up in, what's the newest synth, what's the newest plugin, I have 50 different analyzers, all of that. Which nothing wrong, no value judgment. Yeah, and some of those are great. But if you, take your 5 favorite tools and just say, this is all I can use, that's, for me, a way to inspire creativity, and not get so caught up about different options and just say, nope, this is what it is.
I mean, every once in a while, I'll, go online and buy something specifically. I'll say, okay, I need something to inspire me. And then I'll look around for effects units, processing units, or new synths, and I'll buy one, and I'll say, all right, now I'm just going to go in for like 2 days and just record everything I do and have like a wave file so I can just go and chop up samples. And
yeah, man. So with the Bro Safari project, going through the Moombahton days, through the decline of Moombahton, or whatever you want to call it, the next wave.
Into trap,
right. And you, I think, pivoted and kind of made that transition really well and better than some people from the old scene.
Yeah.
Did you see it coming? Was it a conscious thing?
Yeah, I saw it coming, but more than that, like I'd already been listening to that kind of music. I mean, the style of drum programming that was in the earlier trap tunes was being done in Atlanta for a long time.
Right.
So I had already known how to kind of like produce that type of beat. So for me, that part was already out of the way.
Right.
I just said, okay, now I just got to like figure out this whole like annoying sound to go on top of the drums thing.
Gotta love that annoying sound.
Yeah. So it was a pretty effortless transition in that regard. I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Again, like in retrospect, looking back, there wasn't a moment where I said, okay, I'm not going to do Moombahton. I'm going to do trap now. I'm a trap guy.
Right.
That's, it never happened. Nevertheless, I did kind of drift in that direction.
Sure. And one thing that struck me when I was thinking about it yesterday, too, is that throughout Moombahton and Trap and just the rise of the Bro Safari project, so much, almost all of the success was off of free releases, right? And independent stuff. It wasn't really a label. It wasn't, as far as I could tell, a big cosign. I mean, obviously...
It was all me, 100%.
Right. Yeah. Like, people were paying attention, but it wasn't like somebody was putting you
Moombahton,
on, you know?
Moombahton and Trap. Like, from Bro Safari, the idea behind it from the beginning, like you said, was free. Like, free download, free everything. I didn't want to put, like, anything up. I didn't want there to be any blockade between myself and the potential listener.
Right. And I mean, you're a true SoundCloud success story in that way, I think. You know, like that's what that platform was intended for. Yeah. And to see you where you are, it worked in that sense. And I think about if a kid wanted to give away free music now, how do they do it? Like SoundCloud is still there, but it's not the same.
It's one of those things, man. I think right place, right time. That's a common theme throughout any industry, not music, the film industry or anything. People who are in these positions, enviable positions, they often will tell you, right place, right time, right set of skills, and right people around me, and it just kind of worked out that way. So I mean, 100% SoundCloud. Like when I discovered it, I said, "This is awesome. I can just put my stuff up. I can put my own artwork up there. I can type up what I want to. I can interact with my fans. I can." Go listen to other stuff. This is perfect. And then SoundCloud quickly turned into a shit show.
Right.
Sorry. I mean, it is, I can't go on there. And it sucks because, like I said, before there was no fan gating or anything like that. And I'll admittedly say, like, when I give away stuff for free now, and I still give away everything for free.
Right.
But I do require an email or something like that. That sucks because it's, everybody's the same. And I hear new tunes from new artists all the time that don't have much of a following that I want to play out. Like I'll say, oh, I got this great demo in an email. I follow it to SoundCloud. And there's a thing where they're asking me to link my account to theirs and this and that. And I'd say, well, I guess I'm not playing that tune.
Yeah, man.
And that sucks because they're just doing what they got to do.
Right.
Or what they think they have to do.
Right.
And you just kind of shot yourself in the foot. Now, like somebody who you'd want to play your tune is not doing it because it wasn't. You should have sent them the MP3 in the email, like we always tell you on Twitter.
Just send the direct link, man. That's all we need. Yeah, it's tough for a new producer, but then again, there's probably new techniques that I don't even know about or new ideas that we'll soon see happening for people to get their music out there.
The problem is it kind of became this thing where it's like reposts.
Yep.
And that's not organic. And when it's not organic, it may draw some more eyeballs to it, but it's not genuine. And you can't ever gauge what your true audience is.
That's true. Yeah. It's deceptive to the artist, and I think it's deceptive to the listener because they're no longer getting, a true representation of what that artist thinks is really cool and wants to share with them. Yeah. Instead, they're getting, whatever the repost group that the artist is a part of said to post on Monday, which, and, I'll fully admit, like I'm in a few of those repost groups. I, at a certain point, felt like I had to do it. I don't know
How
where
does that
I'm
make
at.
you feel though?
Not great, but at the same time, when I did it,
like I said, doing what you got to do.
Right.
Exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah.
So now that we've identified that that's an issue, it's like, how do we get out of that?
Right.
How do we, as all of us together?
Right.
There needs to be a new platform.
That's
perhaps.
the thing I think SoundCloud has done. I mean, I don't think you can reverse the clock on how it works.
I find more new artists through Twitter than SoundCloud.
Yeah.
And that's without even listening. That's just kind of going through and looking at what people, who's mentioning who. And I say, okay, I've seen this name pop up a lot. Like now I'm going to go to their SoundCloud. But if I go on SoundCloud and just try to find stuff, it's just it's hard.
Yeah,
man. It's
man.
just so much noise.
Yeah. No, my feed is just I can't use my feed at all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man.
So what do we do? Start a new platform?
I hope somebody does, man. I mean, I think,
I'm in. I'll invest.
Dude, 100%, because, I mean, obviously, like, the business has moved on to Spotify, but Spotify isn't going to take care of especially DIY artists the same way that SoundCloud did. And I love Spotify. I think it does a lot of amazing things, but it's just it's intended for different purposes.
Streaming only. You know, the SoundCloud was interactive because that was my favorite thing about it was that people could comment on the waveform.
Yeah.
And then you could comment back. And then, like, you could, when you were going through SoundCloud, you could tell who had like a banging track because it had all these like little images on the bottom. You're like, oh, what's this? And so I wanted that. I was like, I want a track. I want a track that has all those comments on it. You know what I mean? I want that. Something to strive for. And then I remember when they took that stuff out, I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, right. There was a lot of questionable activity, but I think that actually ties into kind of the way I wanted to start bringing this home was that we're in this sort of weird transitional phase in the dance music scene, especially in bass music and heavier stuff, where, we've seen a couple subgenres rise and fall pretty quickly, and a lot of flash in the pan guys have kind of come and gone in the last couple of years. And I think for us who are still here, the question is kind of what's next. And I don't know that anyone has really figured it out yet. But it's interesting, like I was thinking about your Collisions record that you put out, which is, this really interesting mix of a bunch of different styles, trying out new ideas. You can hear influences of the old stuff, and maybe you can hear where things will go in the future as well. But that to me seemed like kind of a transitional record. And I feel like everyone is trying to find that sort of, how they can transition to the next phase and what they're going to look like in the next couple of years. Do you feel that way?
Do I feel
just that a transition is happening, or personally as an artist that you're in transition?
There's definitely multiple answers here. One, I'll go with myself first, and that's yes. Big time.
Yeah.
I actually am more in love with dubstep and trap right now than I was the last 3 years leading up to now. And that's because I've kind of let go a bit of a lot of personal stuff that was holding me down. But
what were you getting disenchanted with?
Yeah, just a lot of it had to do with touring. Yeah. I was just traveling way too much and overexposed. The same songs every night, every DJ, every night, same song, blah, 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 blah. And I just sounded way ungrateful, and don't get me wrong, but I still have to be inspired,
right?
You know what I mean? So it just wasn't inspiring. So I started getting bitter about it for a long time. Now I'm not so much. Now I'm into it. I'm just trying to have fun. But even that being said, I've got to move. I got to keep it moving here. With drum and bass, I just kind of got burnt out. With Moombahton, kind of just got burnt out. With trap, I'm kind of burnt out. Trap and dubstep, just kind of burnt out. So for me. We can talk about this more in a minute, but I'm working on an album with UFO, and it's all bass music, but it's not what you think. It's not dance floor bangers.
Sure.
It's heady, it's deep, very inspired by nature.
Oh, cool.
It's gonna be very cool. And then he and I are also doing another album for a new project that's it's all live. It's like Radiohead meets Aphex Twin meets Bro Safari and UFO, and it's we have a singer. It's going to be a very lush thing. That is going to be later in 2018 probably. So yes, big shift for me. Playing guitar again, making stuff I want to make. And when I DJ next year, I'll probably still do some sets where I play heavy sets, but also do sets with UFO where we perform our album hopefully. Okay, now going back to the other part about everybody else in the transition.
Right.
For years, I've been saying like, "Where's this going? Where's this going? I don't know." And then dubstep's dead. And then you look out. Like I just saw Snails sold out to the Tacoma Dome.
I saw that too.
For 6,500 kids. Don't tell me dubstep's dead. It's not dead.
No, not at all.
Furthermore, in fact, this whole rhythm thing that's going on. I can't even begin to get into the technical definitions of any of the stuff going on within rhythm because I don't understand it. But what I do understand is that it has that energy and that spunk that I keep referring to in this discussion. And that's the punk rock DIY thing.
Yeah, it's weird.
I see these young kids, and I'm sorry if any of them are listening. I don't mean to call you guys kids. But I see these younger guys that are doing this, and I think they don't give a shit about what I think, what you think. they don't care if their version of rhythm is disgraceful to some other old dubstep guy. They don't care. And that is what's going to make for a healthy form of artistic expression. So I'm not saying like rhythm is the future, but I'm saying whatever's going on right now in that scene, there's something like organic and very cool and it has a lot of energy behind it. So I see that happening. And then beyond that, I think guys like Troy Boy, for example, he came along in the last couple of years and kind of flipped trap on its head and said, no. Like this, we're going to add like an MPC, like live hip hop feel to this. We're going to get more of a groove behind the drums.
Right.
So I see it evolving into a cooler direction, actually, which is very reassuring. I see, things getting cooler and more. Like,
and that you still can reinvent it and still have those new ideas.
Exactly. Like less and less attached to what people think is cool and popular and more about what they think sounds cool to them and their friends.
Yeah. And you were saying, you were getting burnt out hearing all these same songs over and over. And I think that's really easy when you're in the touring mode and you're hearing everyone play, these banger after banger after banger sets of kind of a lot of the same songs. Mentally, at least for me, then I start getting trapped in this zone of like, well, I can only make stuff that's going to fit in with these kind of sets.
Yeah.
And
so then you just have to make a whole set of something that doesn't fit in with it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's what UFO and I are trying to do right now. Is make a set that will work for that crowd, but you got to give them something they don't know that they want.
I think that's the wave, man. I've always loved with you and UFO, the sort of limitless creativity, really that you guys are making all of this sort of bizarre, interesting, awesome music, but then also putting it out there, right? And it's not just sort of something you're doing for fun with on the side.
Yeah.
Like I like that you're putting it on the same platform as everything else because it deserves to be there.
Sure.
But I think a lot of artists...
not as expected.
Right. A lot of artists, I think, wouldn't have the confidence to do that, you know, and just to say that, this is also a part of me.
Yeah. I haven't thought of it like that. So that's cool.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Well, I mean, I always, if I listen back to me and UFO's previous album, Animal, I can hear it there that it wasn't like the norm of what else, everything else was coming. And coincidentally, was one of the more successful periods of Bro Safari was when I was just sticking to my guns and doing what I wanted to do.
Right.
And, like I said, if you look at the last 2 or 3 years where I started kind of saying, I don't like, all I could think is like, well, just do more shows. If you're not feeling it in the studio, just do more shows, which made it worse.
Well, we're here in Los Angeles. You're about to play a show. You're on a tour for your last record. I mean, where are you at with kind of your own place in the scene in 2017?
I feel like I'm in a pretty comfortable place. I like the idea of people kind of being doing this podcast is a good example because I can kind of speak more directly to fans or listeners and give my perspective on things. I don't get on social media much, I don't tweet much anymore. I don't post much on Instagram. I don't even know the password to my Facebook. I have my management runs that because I just refuse to do it. Point is I don't participate much in the social media thing, and if anything, that's something that I think holds me back. Maybe throws off my place in the scene a little bit because I'm not out there posting stuff constantly. But I don't know.
Well, I'm the same as you, man. I'm not particularly active on that, and I think for both of us as well, we're not part of a squad or a crew or whatever that And I do wonder sometimes if that holds me back or slows things down. But at the same time, I mean, if we were forcing ourselves to do it every day, we wouldn't have fun.
The problem is that I see everybody else just say everything that comes into their minds.
Yeah.
And that drives me crazy, man. Like, I hate it. I hate looking out and seeing people that I love dearly and shaking my head and saying, like, why would you say that?
Right.
Not nobody cares, but nobody needs to know that. And then you got the hater culture of the internet, which is anything pops in your mind, you have to say it.
Right.
When did that start? Nobody would ever say half the shit they say online in real life to another person.
Yeah, 100%.
So that gets tiring.
Yeah,
I don't want to be a part of it.
I don't blame you, man. I mean, there's this, sort of argument culture, or maybe that's a bad phrase for it, but
Contrarians.
Contrarian. That's a really good way to put it. Is that if you see somebody say something and you just know an argument to contradict it, you might not even believe that argument or know the history of the background, but there's that impulse to just say, well, actually, there's also this other view, and you just. You didn't have to say that.
Social media is a problem. And I'm not, that transcends a music discussion.
Right.
It's a problem, man. And it's something that our society is going to have to take a long, hard look at.
Yeah.
But, whatever. That's probably a whole other podcast.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I don't even think anyone, I think 100 years from now, people can do studies about how it changed society, but we don't even know it's happening right now.
Yeah.
We won't see the ramifications for a long time, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I hope people take a look at it a little more in depth. Take a look at themselves and their place in that, and how it's contributing to bad things in this world and in our country, especially.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully,
and in the music scene,
right?
It's just let's get things back to a level where we're just not all just being assholes to each other. We're here making music, and you guys want to listen to it. Like, let's do it. Let's do it together.
I love that. That's a good sentiment, man. Well, before we were talking about getting together to do this podcast like a month ago when we were texting, you had mentioned there was you wanted to do it, or there was something you wanted to vent about. I don't know if you even remember what that was, but if it was, I wanted to give you a space.
Well, no, I mean, I don't have a speech prepared or anything, anything particular. It's just, I would be hypocritical to just come out and just start spouting out a bunch of shit when I was just saying, you don't have to say every thought that comes to you.
Right,
These are my beliefs and how I feel. Things that we touched on, such as branding.
Mm-hmm.
I could have gone in much harder on that.
But I mean, all of this are, what goes into making you the artist that you are, right? And I think, we were talking earlier, what is our experience worth? I think the fact that you've been doing this as long as you have through different projects and to be at this, successful level you're at, I think it gives you some gravitas to speak on it,
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like I said, I don't have anything in particular to like toss out there to people, but I'm happy that you've given me this opportunity to even speak at length about anything.
Oh man, I'm happy you're doing it, man. We've never known each other that well, but it's every time we cross paths, man, it's always a good conversation. And if the listeners take away anything, at least in my mind, it's hearing you talk about the DIY and the punk attitude to it, Well,
there's something to that, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot to be taken away from that mindset and of DIY, and it's that nobody's going to do it for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that these days that's become a thing where people expect things to be done for them, especially in this scene, I've made one song. Like I got a sick logo. I got a sick this. I got a decent song. And now I need an agent. I need a manager. I need an assistant. I need a hashtag. I need this and I need that. And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to get at is that I hope that people can start to like peel that artificial shit away and just like, let's get back to the music, because that's what the kids want. They want the music. They want the vibes. They don't give a shit about like how much money you're making at a show or this. They don't care.
Yeah, the
some might, but
whatever,
that's an afterthought to them.
100%.
Yeah.
And to flip it to a positive note too is that I think a lot of kids coming up, it's easy to think like, well, I have to get the branding right. I have to get my squad together. I have to get this big cosign. I have to get this label interested, whatever it is. And the reality is that no, you can still absolutely do it all on your own, And it just takes that strength of belief in yourself and what you're doing. If you know what you're doing is good, if you know that this is what you want to do and it's what you're passionate about, that's, I guess, what I want to be the takeaway is that you can really do it on your own. I think
absolutely
you're a great example of that, man.
Well, thanks, man.
Yeah, dude. Anything else you want to get out there before we wrap this up?
No, I mean,
we could keep talking for hours. But.
Yeah, I could definitely keep going. I don't have anything. Nah, I don't have any.
Fair enough.
Like last minute knowledge to just drop off the top of my head. I wish I did.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned new music coming soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, I think if there's anything to kind of touch on a little more, it's the stuff with UFO.
Yeah. Maybe we should just, because I love him too. And
just real quick. I mean, he, like I mentioned much earlier in the interview, drum and bass, when I started DJing, he was already established as a leading figure in North American
people
drum and
forget
bass.
that.
the fact that we linked and have been working together this long is weird because it was an accidental friendship in a sense, like.
Was he another one where he was like the same
Ed
person back then?
Yeah, Ed he is the most unique person I've ever known in my life.
Yeah, I think
hands
that's
down,
fair to say.
Hands down, and he's one of the best people I've ever known in my life, and I love him like a brother, like for real. He's like a brother to me.
Yeah,
and he and I work better together in the studio than anybody I've ever worked with. Period. We complement each other that well. So recently, I was thinking like, man, maybe I should take off next year completely just to figure out what I'm going to do. And then I was talking to Ed, and we were bouncing around ideas, and we started working on a couple of these ideas. And I was like, well, no, maybe like I should put my energy into a collaborative effort with UFO next year. While it may not take over all of Bro Safari, a lot of my attention as Bro Safari is going to go towards these collaborations with him,
right?
Because I believe in them. And like I said, the idea of us potentially being able to craft a set that we could perform as Bro Safari and UFO, where we play all original stuff or only, mostly original stuff, a live set perhaps. I don't know. It just made me realize that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get away from what I've been doing in a sense and kind of spread my wings artistically. Right. And I have somebody to do it with that we get it. We both get it. I'm really excited about where that's going to go next year.
How far into it are you, into the process?
Well, I mean, we've got about 10 to 12 demos, probably used 4 or 5 of those demos. And so I think in December he's going to fly to Austin for a week, and we'll do another writing session, which we've done 5 or 6 times now at this point over the years.
Yeah,
he'll just fly out for a week, and we'll make 3 songs a day. And then when he leaves, we've just got this mess of music. But it always turns out into something, even if it hasn't come out yet. It's still there.
Right.
Like I said, we have 2 albums.
Yeah, that's so nuts.
So
man.
like the other album is a completely other thing, but that's the thing I'm most excited about. Personally, is being able to play a guitar, have a singer, have live drums, have and produce the shit out of it.
Do you see that as a different group?
Yeah, that's going to be something new entirely. But we're just taking it slow, get it right, and because when we first show it to our audiences, you only have that one chance for them to like it. So we want to make sure it's something that we really love and that we can get behind. And that way, if it does poorly, it doesn't take off, we still have something that we made that, because I want to, I have a kid. Like I want my kid when he's older to listen to my catalog and say, wow, like this is way cooler than everything else he did. Like, Dad, you killed it on this one.
Right.
That's what I want to make.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, what does your kid think of what you do? How much does he understand or kind of get what you're doing?
He gets it on a basic level. He understands that I make music for money as a job. He understands that I have fans. He's been on stage at a show, so he gets it.
It was cool for me. I don't know if you remember at Lollapalooza a couple of years ago. I got to meet your kid and your wife and all that backstage. That was really awesome for me, man.
Yeah, so that show was, that of all audiences for him to stand in front of, Lollapalooza was a crazy one.
Yeah.
So he gets it. Every day, I take him to school every morning, and so every morning I'll play him what I was working on the day before.
Oh, cool.
You know what I mean? And I'll try to just
like a little ritual.
It's the best feedback ever because there's no, like I said earlier, he has no ego. He just says what he thinks.
No filter either.
Sometimes I'll put something on and he'll just start mimicking the sound and I'll say, good, okay, cool, he's doing something. And sometimes he'll just sit there looking out the window and say, do you like that? He'll go, yeah. And I'll say, okay, cool. Like, I know that didn't appeal to him.
Right.
So there's something that's going over the head, like the basics of this song.
Sure.
There's something missing that's going over his head.
Not hitting that primal spot.
Exactly. Yeah. So he gets it.
That's cool. That's a great way. That's a reference that not everyone has is the kid test.
6-year-old.
Yeah, that's great, man. And just to go back to something you said a second ago that I think is a really important point too, is the idea of that first impression that you get with your audience, and that you really only have one shot to be introduced to a new listener, right?
Yeah.
And to introduce a new project or a new sound. And that's something that I try to tell producers if they ever ask me, that really take your time and be patient with it and craft it the way you want, because there's such a rush now to get online and get numbers and get likes and reposts and all that. And that's really, that's missing the point of if you didn't get online and didn't get any likes for a year, but made a really good song.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, that to me, that'll take you way farther.
Yep. You're 100% right.
Yeah.
The way you put it is perfect too, because, you know, that's why I said, you know, maybe I should take a year off. And because I said to myself, well, if I was going to take a year off, then, you know, I would come back at the end of that year with like a lot of really great music to show for it. And it would probably make it worth it. It would pay off in the end.
Right.
Granted, I don't think that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not going to take a year off.
Yeah.
But I am going to take some time to myself to make sure that I'm happy with all the music that I plan on releasing towards the middle of the year, you know?
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, and that seems
it's worth it. I mean, it's, you know, if you're not happy with what you're doing, what's the point?
Right.
Like, who are you trying to impress?
Yeah.
Some random kid?
Well, yeah, you know, 100%. And I think it's just a matter of you got to tune out all the noise, right? And the external pressure. Even for you at this point in your career, I'm sure you have, you know, Henley or someone, you know, if you said, I want to take a year off, that wouldn't be what they want to hear. You know what I mean? Hi, Henley.
Hey, Henley.
But no, you know, I think at all levels, there's going to be that pressure of like, oh, no, you got to, you know, put it out now, do something now.
Pressure is the thing that kills, though.
Yeah.
You know, like we were talking about social media, for example, right? I've never had a problem with social media. And then I think it was sometime in the last year and a half, 2 years, I was told, hey, post more on Instagram. And I was like, what? No, now I'm not going to post at all. Don't tell me what to do. You know, and that's I know that's not a rational line of thinking, but that's called being a control freak.
Right.
And, you know, to be a control freak and have managers and agents and this and publicists and this and that, it's a tough thing. You either have to give them full control or you have to be very active in shaping everything. And I think for a while I was like, all right, I'm just going to let people kind of run the show for me, and then I'm going to try to focus on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It just made me more bitter about things, you know, when the only person to blame was me.
Right.
I can take control of the project whenever I want because it's my project. It's not theirs. This is my project. I made this myself.
Yeah. And you're the one who had the vision for it.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like when I started this project, it was literally me. And like I got myself off the ground and did it. So I spent a lot of time just like blaming little things here and there when it's like, it's up to me.
Yeah.
You got to take control of your life sometimes. You got to take control of what's going on in your world. If something's not right, fix it.
Yeah, it's up to all of us, man.
So.
And, you know, you can't, it's easy to get sort of hear other voices in your head and take that as something you need to change. And there's nothing wrong with constructive criticism, but, you know, at the end of the day, I think it does come down to you as an artist, right? And what your original intentions were.
Yep.
You know, I usually try to wrap up just by asking a kind of random question.
Sure.
First thing that pops into your mind, don't think about it too hard. Just a time in your life that you can remember. It could be from your childhood or it could be from last week when music really affected you in a moment, gave you goosebumps or made you cry or made you think about something differently or opened up your world, a moment in your life. I mean,
if you're asking me to not think about it, something's coming up by the top.
Perfect.
And it's actually a good anecdotal piece of evidence because it's a very mundane thing. The first thing that popped in my head was after a tour I did 2 years ago, I went on a snowboarding trip. I was so tired. I was so over everything. I didn't want anything to do with anything, dance music, anything. I just wanted to unwind. Took the chairlift up to the top of the mountain, put on my music, and I just sat there for a minute and there was nobody around anywhere. And I was just sitting there on the side of a cliff, looking out. I was listening to Radiohead, like my favorite Radiohead song. And I got the goosebumps and I just sat there and I was like, okay, music has this power to sedate you, to just completely silence the noise going on. I was depressed, mad, angry, and it just made me forget about it for a minute. So
yeah, no, that's beautiful.
The power
man.
of music,
and that's what we're trying to get back to always, right? Yeah, that's a really awesome way to wrap it up, man. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
What song was it, by the way?
How to Disappear Completely.
Good choice.
Yeah, man. That's my favorite one ever.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, man, thank you for doing this.
Thank you, man.
This was really
Had fun.
awesome. Hell yeah. Peace, dude.
Bye.
All right, that's the show. Shout out Bro Safari for sitting down with me for that conversation. One of my favorites, man. Don't forget to check out his remix that he did with Etc. Etc. for A Different Way by DJ Snake. Keep your eyes peeled for all his new material, new projects dropping in 2018. My name is Willie Joy. You can follow me on all social media at Willie Joy or at backtobackpod. Don't forget to email me your questions, comments, concerns, sexual hangups. backtoback@gmail.com is the address for all of that. Hope you guys are having a great start of your new year. I will see you next week. This has been Back to Back. Have a good one, guys. Peace.